Hello everyone, and welcome to Cleared to Land. On this episode, we're going to explore, in detail, how Air Transat Flight 236 ran its tanks dry in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and how a 19-minute glide in the dark brought all 306 people on board down safely. It is 26 minutes past 6 in the morning, Universal Time, over the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. An Airbus A330 is cruising through the dark at 34,500 feet, and its right engine has already been dead for 13 minutes. The gauges say this airplane left Toronto with nearly 47 tons of fuel. The gauges now say it is almost gone. And then, 65 nautical miles from the only runway within reach, the left engine flames out too. 150 tons of airliner has just become a glider. On board, 306 people, 19 minutes of altitude, and one island in an ocean of black water. This is the story of how every single one of them walked away. Flight 236 was supposed to be routine. Air Transat, a Canadian holiday carrier, flying its overnight run from Toronto to Lisbon on the 23rd of August, 2001. The airplane was an Airbus A330, registration C-GITS, barely 2 years old, one of the most automated airliners flying. In the left seat, Captain Robert Pichet, 48 years old, 16,800 flying hours. Beside him, First Officer Dirk de Jager, 28, with 4,800. Behind them, 11 cabin crew and 293 passengers, most of them headed home to Portugal. The fuel load that night was 46.9 tons, 5.5 tons more than the rules required. Hold on to that number. It is about to matter more than anyone on board could possibly know. Because the story of this flight had already been written 7 days earlier in a maintenance hangar in Montreal. A routine inspection had found metal flakes in the oil of the right engine, and Air Transat decided to change the engine. Their own spare wasn't available, so Rolls-Royce loaned them one. That loaned engine had been built to an older standard, a configuration this airline had never worked on. And when the technicians tried to fit the hydraulic pump, it would not go. It pressed against the engine's fuel line. There was a service bulletin that explained exactly this conflict and exactly how to resolve it. The lead technician tried to look it up, and the company's computer system would not give it to him. Under time pressure, in the middle of the night, he accepted verbal advice instead. Swap the fuel line, keep the older hydraulic line. To make them fit, the two lines were forced apart by hand. The engine passed every check. The airplane flew for 6 days, and on the 7th night, over the middle of the Atlantic, the two lines that had been grinding against each other, one carrying fuel, one carrying 3,000 pounds of hydraulic pressure, finally gave way. 4:38 in the morning. The airplane is past 30 degrees west, the deep ocean beyond radar, where air traffic control is a voice on high-frequency radio and a position report. Inside the right engine, the chafed fuel line cracks open. Fuel begins streaming overboard into the night, at its worst, 13 tons an hour. There is no alarm for this. Nobody knows. The airplane simply starts getting lighter, faster than it should. 25 minutes later, the first clue arrives, wearing a disguise. The oil on the right engine reads wrong. Too cold, pressure too high, quantity slowly falling. The crew radios their maintenance center in Quebec, and the engineers are puzzled too, because every number is still technically inside its limits. What nobody can see is the mechanism. A torrent of cold fuel is rushing through the engine's heat exchanger on its way overboard, chilling the oil as it goes. The one instrument pointing at the leak is the one nobody has been taught to read. At 11 minutes past 5, the airplane itself quietly makes things worse. The automation begins a scheduled transfer. 3.2 tons of fuel pumped forward out of the tail tank into the wing tanks, and from there, straight toward the crack. The transfer also hides the loss from the airplane's own fuel logic for another 15 minutes. 5:33. A quiet advisory appears on the engine display. The crew brings up the fuel page and sees it. The right side is far lighter than the left. A fuel imbalance, something every airline pilot knows how to fix. Working from memory, they open the crossfeed valve and switch off the right side pumps, so the healthy left tanks feed both engines. It is exactly what the imbalance drill says to do. But the printed checklist carries a warning the memory items do not. Do not apply this procedure if a fuel leak is suspected. Nobody suspects a leak. And from this moment on, the fuel in the good wing is running through the crossfeed, out through the fractured line, and into the sea. 5:45. The totals fall below what the flight needs to reach Lisbon. The captain turns toward the only runway within reach, Azores, a military airfield on the island of Terceira in the Azores, and 3 minutes later, the crew tells Santa Maria Oceanic Control they are diverting. 7 tons left. The cabin lights are switched off, and crew members press their faces to the windows over the wing, looking for any sign of a leak. It is night. There is nothing to see. The numbers keep falling. 4.8 tons, 12 tons below plan. The crew tells maintenance the readings are inexplicable. A leak this size has never happened to anyone they know. 5:59, 1 ton in the right wing, 3.2 in the left. 6:13, 39,000 feet, 150 miles out. The right engine, the one with the crack, runs its side dry and flames out. The descent begins. 2 minutes later, the fuel readout shows 600 kilograms from 47 tons. At 6:23, First Officer de Jager keys his microphone and says the word Mayday. And at 6:26, the left engine dies. The flight data recorder and the voice recorder die with it. From here on, the airplane is not even recording what happens to it. What is left of the airplane now hangs on a small propeller. A ram air turbine spun by the slipstream swings out of the belly and powers the emergency systems, the captain's flight instruments, and not much else. No autopilot, no flaps, no anti-skid braking, no thrust reversers. 5 minutes after the second engine quits, the cabin loses its pressure, and oxygen masks spill from the ceiling in the dark. The passengers have already been briefed for a ditching, life jackets on, brace positions taught row by row, 3 of the flight attendants repeating everything in Portuguese, because most of the people on this airplane are Portuguese. At 6:31, a new voice. Azores approach, a military controller with radar. The crew checks in with the word Mayday, passing 27,300 feet, 33 miles out. They ask for the runway lights to be flashed. Then they ask again. And somewhere in the black ahead of the windscreen, a string of lights blinks, and the captain has his aiming point. He would say later that he had those lights from a long way out and that he was certain he could reach them. Pichet keeps the airplane deliberately high. Run out of altitude out here, and you are in the ocean. At 6:36, 22,000 feet, 14 miles, the crew calls the runway in sight and asks whether the fire trucks are standing by. They are. The trucks are already rolling. He arrives over the field with far too much height, on purpose, 8 miles off the runway at 13,000 feet. So he does the only thing left. He wraps 150 tons of silent airliner into a full circle over the ocean. At night, then turns down the final approach, trading away altitude he can never get back. the slats come out. The landing gear comes down. The speed across the threshold is about 200 knots, far faster than any normal landing because with no engines, speed is the only thing keeping this airplane in the air. 6:45. The wheels hit hard, 1,000 feet past the threshold, and the jet bounces, airborne again for 1,600 feet. On the second touchdown, the captain holds it down and stands on the brakes, the only brakes he has, an emergency reservoir with no anti-skid. The main wheels lock. Every main tire shreds within 450 feet. The wheels themselves grind down against the runway, and 7,600 feet down the pavement, the airplane stops. Small fires flicker around the left landing gear. The fire crews are on them in seconds. They were waiting beside the runway. The captain orders the evacuation. One door jams a few centimeters open. Passengers are turned to the next one. And roughly 90 seconds after the airplane stops moving, all 306 people are out. 16 have cuts and bruises. 2 are seriously hurt coming off the slides. Every single person is alive. The investigation belonged to Portugal, with Canada's Transportation Safety Board working alongside. And what investigators found in the right engine looked almost too small for the story. An L-shaped crack, about 3 inches long in the fuel line, exactly where the hydraulic line had been pressing against it. Both pipes went to the Rolls-Royce laboratory in Derby for analysis. Both were perfectly made. They were simply never meant to be installed together. A new fuel line against an old hydraulic line, the mismatch from the engine change 7 nights before. Forced apart by hand during installation, the pressurized hydraulic line had simply pushed itself back, closed the gap, and begun to grind. Then the investigators ran the numbers that hurt. If the crew had recognized the leak and run the fuel leak checklist at 5:45, the moment they committed to La Geche, the airplane would have landed with more than 5 tons of fuel still on board. Engines running. If they had done nothing at all, never opened the crossfeed, never touched a switch, it would have landed with nearly 4. The fuel was always enough. What ran out was information. But read the findings, and something unusual happens. This report refuses to make villains. The crew had never been trained to recognize a fuel leak in flight, because almost nobody's crews were, at any airline, anywhere. And then, finding number 12, in the board's own words, the captain's skill in conducting the engine's outglide to a successful landing averted a catastrophic accident and saved the lives of the passengers and crew. The same system that set the trap watched 2 pilots fly their way out of it. Because deep in the report sits the detail that explains everything that came after. 4 years earlier, on the 24th of August, 1997, 4 years to the day, an Air France crew had done almost exactly the same thing, cross-fed their tanks into a fuel leak and lost an engine. The caution note, the fuel leak checklist itself, the very defenses this crew never reached, had been written because of that flight. The protection existed on paper, but nothing on the flight deck forced it in front of a busy crew in the middle of an ocean night. Paper defenses, this report concluded, were not enough. So the fixes came in layers, spreading outward from that runway. Within 5 days, Airbus told every operator of Rolls-Royce powered A330s to inspect the clearance between those 2 lines, and Rolls-Royce issued the service bulletin to match. Within a week, the United Kingdom made that inspection a legal requirement, and France followed, hardening it into an airworthiness directive for the whole fleet. Transport Canada suspended Air Transat's long-range overwater authority, fined the airline $250,000, the largest penalty of its kind in Canadian aviation history, and sent every crew in the country a circular on the symptoms of a fuel leak. And then came the deeper fixes, the ones aimed at what actually failed. In May of 2002, Airbus released a modification that teaches the airplane to do the arithmetic no tired human reliably does over an ocean at night. From then on, the fuel computers continuously compare what the airplane left the gate with against the fuel burned plus the fuel remaining. If the books disagree by more than 3.5 tons, the signature of a leak, an amber caution lights up and names the problem. Fuel used and fuel on board do not agree. The cross-check that would have caught this leak more than an hour early is now performed by the airplane itself on every flight. That November, France made the rewritten fuel leak procedure mandatory on every A330 by airworthiness directive, strengthened again 3 years later, and adopted by the United States in 2006 for every one of these jets on its registry. And in 2007, when American regulators rewrote the rules for long-range twin-engine flying, they wrote low fuel alerting into the certification standard itself, citing this flight as a reason the rule exists, which is why today, when two fuel gauges disagree at cruising altitude, the airplane speaks up first. And the first line the crew reads is the question this crew was never taught to ask. Is the fuel actually leaving the airplane? The airplane was repaired on Terceira and flew for Air Transat for almost 2 more decades. Crews called it the Azores glider. Robert Pichet went back to the left seat too, but the real monument to Flight 236 is invisible. It is a line of logic in every Airbus fuel computer, quietly checking the books, second by second, over every ocean. And it is one printed question at the top of a checklist, asked calmly on every flight so that no crew ever has to answer it the way this one did. With 19 minutes of altitude, 65 miles of black water, and 306 lives gliding behind them, everyone walked away. Well, I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I did. If you'd like to support the channel, please don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.